Let's talk about spinning attacks. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So spinning attacks is something which have been given a fair amount of attention in the past on various channels, not just mine of course. And the general view is that spinning attacks are crazy, suicidal, stupid things to do that you wouldn't do in real martial arts, historical martial arts. Not really. That's not really the case. That's not really true. Spinning attacks do exist in modern martial arts, and certainly in traditional martial arts as well. I won't say they're normal, and I definitely admit that things like Hollywood and, I guess Bollywood as well, and Kung Fu movies from China overuse spinning. And a lot of times spinning is used in a way that would be incredibly high risk. I won't say suicidal, but very, very high risk. But on the Facebook page Schola Gladiatoria Context Posting, which is a fan-run page here, a video was posted literally 7 hours ago, according to when I'm watching it, by Dmitry Tanadimka Stranik. So thanks for sharing that. And it is from the page Come Try LARP. So this video goes full credit to Come Try LARP page, and I'm showing it here purely, well, hopefully it'll give them some extra publicity, but also for discussion point. And maybe some of you know that page, or some of you are, I guess lots of you out there are actually LARPers. I've dabbled in LARP in my youth. I don't do any LARP at the moment, but I certainly have good friends who do tons of LARP and run LARP games and stuff. So this move, let's look at it. It is a spinning attack that lands successfully. Okay, so let's first of all see how he's doing it and how he's setting it up. So the very first, if we stop there, the very first thing that we see he starts to do is he threatens with the point. He threatens. It's a feint. Okay, so it's a threatening attack with the thrust. And his opponent lifts his longsword or two-handed sword in a way to defend against that initial threat of the point. So he's done the right thing right off the bat, and that's presenting a threat to a different place than he's intending to land his strike. But he's also doing something else very important while he threatens this thrust. He's also starting to wind the body up, and notice that he starts the footwork for this, and he's got very nice footwork. He starts the wind up while he's presenting the threat. Now, an experienced opponent against him might realize that there's no threat to that initial point, because what he's done is he's put the point online and then he's turned the body away in such a way that he couldn't really deliver the point. But I think his opponent kind of reads that, because you can see that he's guarding against the point, but he doesn't look very convinced by it. He knows that something else is coming. So next, the guy does a backwards passing traverse. Okay, so he winds up, and at a certain point he has his back entirely to the opponent, okay, which is the dangerous part. This is the danger zone. But what I want to really emphasize here and hammer home is that there's risk inherent to everything. As soon as you when you cross the road, there's risk. When you eat a meal, there's risk. When you get out of bed in the morning, there's risk, okay? And it's all to do with calculating those risks. Now, this is without doubt a high risk move. Well, it's not, because it's using LARP weapons, okay? So what's the worst that can happen? The other guy will hit him first, okay? But if this was with real sharp swords, long swords or rapier or whatever, then this is very, very high risk. But lots of things are high risk when you're fighting with swords, and there are certain times, if you're much better than the opponent, or you just read the moment, you just see there's an opening, you're going to take a high risk once in the entire fight because there might be a potential high gain from this. It's worth doing techniques like this. And in this case, the stars aligned, it totally comes together, and it works for him. So yes, it's massively high risk, but it pays off. And it's really important to state that lots of things in combat, lots of things in life are high risk, whether they're high financial risk or whether they're high physical risk. Sometimes you take a high risk for a potential high gain, and it pays off. It's a gamble, okay? And sometimes gambling does pay off, kids. Listen to Uncle Matt. So he turns back, and then so he's wound up, and there's a very interesting body mechanic here because he's wound his body up so that then all he has to do is whip and unload that cut, which quite sensibly he aims low. Now notice that his opponent is guarding high, so his opponent totally saw what was coming. He was like, yeah, you're threatening with a point, oh no, you're going to come around that side, and then he defends as if he's going to get hit in the head on this side or high line on this side. And he does, in fairness to him, he does sweep the point down. He senses that that cut's kind of going to come in low. But unfortunately, his footwork isn't as good as his blade work here, and he leaves himself too close, too vulnerable, and boom, he doesn't slip the leg in time. He tries to get that leg out of the way. He lifts it off the ground to try and get over the top of that blow. But he's just too slow with his feet, unfortunately. And remember, feet tend to move slower than hands in combat, and feet tend to move a lot slower than weapons because weapons are a lever, and the tip of the weapon's moving far faster than we can move our hands or feet. So there we go, the technique works. Now, would I advise this technique, therefore, in a real fight with real swords, or even would I advise it in a HEMA context with blunt steel swords? So a lot of people in the comments on the Schola Gladiatoria context posting page start to get into an argument about can you do this with real swords? Well, first of all, I would say yes, you can. Okay, I have totally seen techniques done like this with steel feathers, with steel sabers, with steel rapiers. Absolutely, there's a guy who used to be in my club, trained for many, many years with us, and then life moved on, he moved away, but he's still in contact, and he was very good at spinning attacks. So yes, you can make it work in a sporting context. No question, you can do it with a steel sword, you can do it in a HEMA context, in a competition. It might not pay off, but it might pay off. So sometimes it's worth a risk, and depending on who your opponent is and how the fight's going and things like that, and how good you are and how much you've practiced it. Would you want to try this with real sharp swords in a real fight? Well, again, the risk now goes even higher. So if in a HEMA context, this is the risk, but this is the potential gain, in a real fight context, you might find that there starts to become a bigger disparity between the risk goes up and the gain only doesn't proportionately go up with it. Because, of course, if it doesn't pay off, the opponent might stab you through the body or chop your head off, or chop your arm off or leg off or whatever. So in a real fight, yes, the risks are greater. Does that mean to say that people never did stuff like this in real fights? Hell no! People take massive risks. Sometimes people take even bigger risks in a fight than they would do in a sporting context. It depends on the person, it depends on the situation, and yes, the context. So absolutely, people could do this in a real fight. Did they? Is there any evidence? Yes, there is. So spinning attacks are absolutely mentioned in period sources. They're mentioned in sources, particularly even in the period where I often study in colonial warfare. They're mentioned in reference to things happening in China and in India. So it probably did happen, or almost certainly did happen in history. Is it in any treatises? Kind of, yes. The most obvious example is when we look at the Montante, the Spanish and Portuguese sources for the use of the large two-handed sword, where you're using a big two-handed sword and you're facing multiple opponents. The simple fact is, when you're facing multiple opponents, they will often end up on either side of you or all sides of you. So you need to turn around. So inherently, there are going to be attacks which are spinning attacks. And indeed, you do find turning around attacks in certain small sword and rapier techniques. I can't personally think of any longsword treatises, but that's not to say it's not out there. I might just not know about it. So, to conclude, can you do this type of spinning attack as seen here with the larp sword? Certainly it's easier with the larp sword because the larp sword's lighter and you can hold it right at the end and wave it around and hit with it more easily. So definitely it's easier, physically easier in a larp context with the larp sword. It is also obviously way, way safer in a larp context. So does it get progressively harder and more dangerous with steel swords? Yes. Does it get progressively harder and more dangerous with steel sharp swords in a real fight? Yes. Does that mean people didn't do it? No, people take risks. So that's what I want you to take away from this. And there is some evidence for spinning attacks in historical sources. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this. I hope this has made you maybe think about this topic a little bit differently. Have you used spinning attacks, whether it's in HEMA or some other martial arts, even kendo or any other type of, kung fu, any Japanese or Chinese martial arts or Filipino martial arts? Have you ever used it in Kali Eskrima, this type of thing? Have you used spinning attacks convincingly and reliably? Do you have a spinning attack that you regularly use? Post below. I'm very interested to know your experiences and feedback on this topic. And thanks again to Dimitri for posting this on the Schola Gladiatoria context posting page. Check that out. And also thanks to Come Try LARP for letting me use their footage in this video, and I hope you get some extra subscribers out of this. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you soon back on the channel. Cheers, folks.